Hi friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by Books and Jams. I am here today with a very exciting video for you. Very recently, I finished reading Orion and the Starborn by KB Hoyle, and this is an advanced reader copy that I received from Owl's Nest Publishers. And I, today, am going to be talking with KB Hoyle. So I'm excited to share this interview with you and let you get a glimpse into this book in particular and Owl's Nest Publishing a little bit and her writing process. So grab yourself a cup of tea and sit back and enjoy the interview. Hello. I'm here with Karen, or KB Hoyle, and she is the author of this book that I just read that's coming out very soon on November 15th, right?
Yes.
Orion and the Starborn. And so we're just going to chat with Karen a little bit today. So would you just introduce yourself, first of all, for all of us?
I would be happy to. Yeah. My name is Karen, which is a wonderful name to have at this point in history. Didn't anticipate becoming a meme, but that's the way things go. You don't have a choice in such things. I'm an author. Orion and the Starborn is my most recent, and although it is number 12 for me, I write middle grade, and people will call it YA. I like to actually call my books teen because it's more for, my books tend to be more for that kind of 13 to 16 or 15 age group, fantasy and a little bit of science fiction, fairy tale type books and whatnot. And I've been writing for well over a decade now. Also the co-founder of Owl's Nest Publishers. Yay. Yeah. And we publish books for middle grade. We love to focus on upper middle grade as well. And again, for teens. So books for youth and teens is my passion. I love writing books that are really true to the young adult, teenage, adolescent voice, and just figuring out how to really reach and speak to young people. So, and I live in Wisconsin, and I have 4 sons, 2 of whom are teenagers themselves, and one of whom is coming up on that age pretty quickly. So, yeah.
I was going to say, how do you get into the mind of a 11, 12-year-old boy? I'm like, oh, you've got a couple.
I do have a couple. And I taught 8th and 10th grade for years. While I was writing my first 10 books, I was teaching in that age group. So yeah, I've always just kind of been around kids that age. Yeah.
I love it. So here's my plan for our chat. We'll talk about Orion first because we're so excited that this is coming out so soon, and I want people to get excited about it. So we're going to start by talking about Orion, and then maybe a little bit about writing and do process and inspiration and how long you've been writing, all that kind of writerly questions. And then we'll have a little rapid fire type of thing.
Okay.
Just some fun things towards the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's start with Orion. Can you give us your elevator quick pitch? What is Orion about? But I was watching another interview with authors, and they're like, what is it about? But what is it really about? They had the authors answer both of those things. I'm like, that's kind of fun.
Okay, we'll do the what is it about. The elevator pitch for Orion is that it's about a 12-year-old boy who discovers one night, he's always felt out of place in the world, and then he discovers very suddenly one night that someone in the universe wants to kill him. And he runs home, and his grandmother says, well, yeah, someone actually does want to kill you. Surprise, surprise, you're not human. And that launches him on an adventure out of our world to another planet where he has to search for who his real parents are and who wants to kill him and why.
Yeah. It's quite a ride. It's quite a ride. And it does talk about family, friendships. There's a magical school in there. So what would you say were the things that you would say it's really about at its heart, or what you want kids to kind of walk away, or adults walk away from reading this?
So yeah, at its heart, it's kind of got the big themes in there about destiny and self-sacrifice and all of that sort of thing, finding your place, found family. There are adoption themes and things of that sort. But at its heart, Orion is really about the relationship between fathers and sons, I think. Because Orion, even though he is also, of course, looking for his mother, it's not like his mother is unimportant in the situation. And obviously the relationship between mothers and sons is important to me as a mother of 4 sons. But the more complicated relationship for Orion is his search for the presence of his father in his life and his search for his father. And I don't want to spoil things. So as to why that becomes the more complicated relationship for him in the story, and Orion coming to grips with what it means to him. It's not really spoiling anything to say that he has believed himself to be an orphan in the story. And he kind of learns that that's not necessarily the case. But what it means to him to wrestle with the lack of that fatherly presence in his life. And as he searches for his father, working through those feelings of anger and abandonment and searching for what it will mean to him if and when he finds out who his father is.
Sure. Yeah. We'll get to moving on, because clearly this is set up. It's going to be a series trilogy. Do you know how many?
I do know how many.
It's clearly set up for a sequel. We'll just say that much.
Yeah.
With the revelations and with where everything ends at the end of this one. And so I'm not saying anything concrete here because he can't, but I'm very curious with everything that he has learned and experienced in this one, how it will change and moving forward. And I think what you just said about him having to work through those emotions, even once he has some revelations and experiences that move his quest forward, he still has to process all of that. And there's not a lot of processing that happens because he's searching. This book is a lot about him searching. And so I think book 2 will be a lot more moving on forward with all of the world events that are happening in the world that you've developed, but also him personally processing everything that he's learned and experienced.
Yeah. It's really important to me to write books about quiet boys. I think that's really close to my heart too, because my boys are quiet boys, like all of them, honestly. Maybe it's just the way we've raised them, but I honestly don't think I know that nurture is important, but I think it's also just in their nature. We are raising them to be kind and considerate and to just be that sort of human being in life, but none of them are real burly and just kind of, they're just not real. My sons will watch this someday and be like, "Mom," but yeah, but no, I think that quiet boys and I don't know if soft is the right word for it. Gentle boys need more representation in literature, and Orion is that.
Yeah.
And so that's part of his challenge in processing his emotions in this book is I wanted to show how a boy like that might process the sorts of big feelings that he's carrying. So as you say, there's not as much processing going on, but you do start to see that as things are revealed over the course of the story. And yes, moving forward, we'll see more of that.
Yeah.
Again,
that's fine.
More to come, but yeah. So Orion is not your typical again, Orion is middle grade. It's going to be more upper middle grade as a series, obviously, because he starts out 12 years old and 13 years old, and I wanted to write a series for that age group. But he's that sort of he's not a bad boy protagonist. He's not a loud or a hard sort of character. He's not. He's a nugget.
A little cinnamon roll. Yeah. I love it. And I love the friends that Orion has, both on Earth and in the stars, as he learns about this new world where he goes. Let's talk about the world building for a moment, because I'm always so amazed with like people who create new worlds. How did you come up with it? Like what kind of, because it's so different from reading. I read a lot of middle grade and I read a lot of historical fiction. Those are my two kind of favorite things to read. Very different types of writing when you talk about a fantasy sci-fi and a historical fiction, where historical fiction you're doing all this kind of research and looking into these actual events that happen. Well, here you just get to like go creative buck wild and just create whatever you want. So what is that process like? How did you come up with it? Yeah, all of that.
Well, part of it is because I have a degree in history and I taught history for a long time, which gives someone like me the foundation to, well, first of all, just kind of a basin knowledge and a lot of not useless facts, but just a lot of like really good mythologies and material to draw from. Also, people with degrees in history were really good at hunkering down and reading weird stuff, and doing research and things like that. Also, I know enough to know that I would never write a historical fiction ever, like ever. Okay. Because of the details you have to get right. So it's much, in some ways, easier to build your own world. On the other hand, it's not easy, because you still have to construct the internal logic of the story, and it has to hold up to scrutiny. I always tell people it's like, if anybody has seen the movie Inception, it's like building the dreams. So to explain for people watching this who might not have seen Inception, so they build dreams that the dreamer, there's people in the movie, and they build dreams that the dreamer has to not realize they're inside a dream. Okay. So it has to be, they have to build enough of it so that not a complete world, but if the dreamer realizes they're dreaming, then the subconscious attacks the people within the dream. And so they do things, they're basically crafting illusions, staircases that loop back on each other, things like that. And that's the way that world building is as well, is that you have to build just enough so that if the reader comes to the edge of what you've built, it loops them back into the story. Okay. So that they don't question, they just kind of go back and keep going, because there's no way you can build an entire world that is completely workable. Right. So that means creating just enough that the illusion stands, because if the illusion shatters, then secondary belief shatters and the reader's like, I've been yanked out of the story. And that's the worst thing that can possibly happen.
Yeah.
So for me, my process with that is I interrogate the idea. So when I teach creative writing, this is what I teach people to do. So you have an idea, you write the idea down, and then you start asking questions about the idea. So for me with Orion, my great idea was looking up Orion's belt, the constellation, and the belt particularly is my favorite constellation. We were living in Alabama when I started world building, when I first started writing this story, and we had 4 little boys in an 1,100 square foot house. And I used to step outside late at night just to get some space and air and just kind of look at the stars. And Orion's belt is always visible in Alabama. I think it's just because of how far south it is. I don't think it's always visible everywhere. I mean,
I don't know.
astronomy people don't come for me. I don't know. But like it was always visible in Alabama. So I would look up and Orion's belt was always very bright. And I just started to think about it. And this was back in 2014. I started to build this story. And I would think to myself, what if each of those stars, and again, this isn't a big spoiler, this comes out in chapter 1. What if each of those stars, chapter 2, what if each of those stars was a planet and there were people living on them?
Mm-hmm.
What would that look like? Why would they be there?
Mm-hmm.
And what if one person from one of those planets lived here. Why are they here? And then you start to go from there. Why are they here? And if so, where do they live? And who do they live with? And so you act like a detective. And so eventually, if it's a good enough idea, it won't leave your brain. So then you write it down, and then you start answering the questions. Well, then who are their friends? Why is that person their friend? Well, what do they do? And so you start writing down the logical answers to each of these questions. Well, what's that planet like? What are those people like? Why do they do that? What are their powers? What do those powers look like? What are the limitations on them? And you answer and answer and answer the questions, and you think like a reader. What questions would the reader ask about this? What's the answer to that question? What's the answer to that question? And so forth and so on until you run out of questions, basically. And you do all of that before you ever start writing your outline, before you ever write a scene. You might get scene ideas as you go. You probably will. So you write down the idea of the scene, but you need to keep interrogating the idea. I usually fill up a whole composition notebook, before I ever start outlining the book itself. Because if you can't answer those questions before you start writing your book, then
it won't be as complete, like from the get-go, because now at the get-go you already know the political system.
Logic
you already know special abilities that anyone might have. You already know.
You won't anticipate you will not anticipate everything. You'll come then after you've outlined and after you've written your draft, and then in revisions you'll find other things that still need, and then readers, pre-readers will find things. Oh, okay, I've got to go back and fix that. So but you anticipate as much as you can beforehand, and that's how you do your world building and ultimately character building and all that sort of stuff too.
I love it. I'm not at all a writer, so I'm just so intrigued by that whole that whole process. So how long ago was that when you were in Alabama and started thinking about Orion?
So I started thinking about it in 2014, and I picked away at it for the notes and whatnot for, several years. The problem was in 2014, I was still finishing writing my fantasy series. And then I wrote 4-book dystopian series as well, which I was already committed to doing with my previous publishing house. And then I also got an agent and wrote Son of the Deep, and I got an agent and went through all of that. There were so many books before this one came. I knew Orion was going to be special. And so I was waiting for the right time and the right amount of energy to really devote to it. So
I love it. Do you have preference when you're writing? Do you get excited about the friendships or the political side of the world or the creating the world? Like, is there one part of writing the story that just like jazzes you up, like gets you super excited?
Character
all of it.
Character interactions, always. The friendships, the relationships between the people. That's always my favorite part. Writing scenes of dialogue. That's always my favorite. I love having characters interact with each other.
Yeah. I loved Aurora in the story, and what I don't know what that word is, but she's such a opposite of Orion. He's so reserved and hesitant almost about things, and she's in his face, very excited and outgoing, and just kind of swoops him under her wing right away and doesn't ask questions about it, and is so impulsive, and she was a fun character to read. So I always loved when they got together.
I love Aurora. She's probably my favorite. Yeah. Each of the characters kind of arrived very fully formed in my brain. Aurora, Orion, and Apollo. I have a template for how I create characters, but then of course they always kind of take on a life of their own. But Aurora was also inspired by one of my favorite female fantasy characters from a classic fantasy series, The Chronicles of Prydain. I don't know if you've ever read it.
Oh yeah.
If not,
I just read the first one a couple months ago. I haven't read the whole series yet. I've only read the first one.
You gotta carry on. Listen, the first one's the weakest, and they're just you'll read the second one, it will knock your socks off. One of the best books you've ever read.
Oh, cool.
And the fourth one, fourth one is deeply profound. One of my favorite books of all time.
Word. I'm so excited. I need to finish those right away now.
Orion and the Starborn is actually, the whole series is kind of an homage to the Chronicles of Prydain.
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
Because it's just brilliant. But yeah, Island Way from the Chronicles of Prydain. So
Mhm.
Aurora is based a little bit on Island Way.
Okay, I've only just barely met her in the first book, so yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't I didn't pick up on that, but I kind of love it.
Yeah. So for anybody who loves the Chronicles of Prydain, yeah, that's there are little kind of callbacks to Chronicles of Prydain.
It's so cool. I feel like when I was reading this on a very outline level, very different in the details, but I'm in the midst of the Keeper of the Lost Cities series by Shannon Messenger. And
Mhm.
like young girl on Earth finds out she's not exactly who she thought she was, has to go to this new land, discover all of these new things, is on a quest to get answers, but the adults don't always give her the answers that she wants. Like on a very outline level, I'm like, okay, if you like that basic storyline of this is going to be right up your alley, because that is exactly Orion. He finds out he's not who he thought he was and has to go to this new world, is on a quest to get answers, learn
I keep
so many
saying
new
Karen
things,
that.
magical school.
Yeah, I have not read The Keeper of the Lost Cities, and but yeah, people keep telling me that, so now I'm like, I guess I need to go pick up
Oh,
this series.
I love it. It also, if you, I mean, because you do really good characterization in here as well, and I think that's one of that series bonuses is that she just gets into the mind of these kids at an appropriate level.
Yeah,
They feel like Orion feels like a 12-year-old in here. He doesn't feel like a 16-year-old looking back on his life, or I don't know, he just
thank
feels like
you.
a kid, and he makes like kid choices and responds in kid-like ways. And so I did appreciate that a lot. I don't
Thank
like
you.
when middle grade ages up. Like I think you do great also with putting vocabulary in here that is like look it up words, like words that you're going to have to look up. So like it's not dumbed down to a younger reader, but it does feel like a kid conversations, kid choices. I don't know. I really like that aspect of it.
That's that's my goal. So I do appreciate that. Is I don't ever want to dumb down the books. I don't like. I'm not. I mean, no shade to my kids read Captain
Yeah,
Underpants and stuff like that, but I'm not out here to write Captain Underpants.
right.
Um, sort of narratives. I want my books to be a certain, like, yes, I want like not didactic, not like I'm here to teach your kids vocabulary
Sure,
today. Sit
sure.
down and we're gonna have a lesson. Like that's not the point. I want like I learned vocabulary by reading books. Like, like there were big words in the novels that I was reading that were written for me,
Mhm.
And a lot of times you just kind of learned them in context, like, of the sentence.
Mhm.
Um, but I want the characters themselves to feel like the ages that they are supposed to feel,
Mhm.
because that is probably my biggest frustration
Right,
every time I open up, modern books these days is like, this is not how a 17-year-old thinks
no.
sex speaks
No. No.
or acts in a
Right,
romantic relationship for that matter.
right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I appreciated that too. One more thing about this book, in the beginning, he's his grandmother that is raising him on Earth is Korean. I'm just curious if you have Korean influence in your life. Like, why did you choose to make Orion Kim is his last name, and so there's Korean food and just some gentle nods to Korean culture in here. So I just was curious about that aspect of it.
The reason I chose that is because I don't have Korean influence. The reason I chose that is because of him being in Atlanta. I love Atlanta. It's one of my favorite cities, and we lived in Birmingham, Alabama, for 14 years, and spent a lot of time in Atlanta, just going back and forth. We live in Birmingham. You kind of if you're gonna go vacation, you go down to the Gulf. You can go to Atlanta. You go various places that, just kind of getting out and around, go up to Tennessee. Not that Birmingham isn't lovely and great in it, but if you're going to go someplace. So yeah, we loved to go to Atlanta. Over explaining that. But there's a large Korean population in Atlanta. Like there's a whole area of the city, trying to remember exactly where it was. I want to say kind of north of the city, where I don't know if I don't think it would be called like sort of Koreatown or anything like that, but kind of in the suburbs up there too, where their whole areas where everything is in Korean. And I don't know, it just popped into my brain that it would be with the high population of Korean influence there. I didn't want it just to be, all of his friends are white and he's living with a white grandmother. Let's just have his best friend be Black and Atlanta is a very Black city as well, obviously. So that was important to me. And then just to have him be with being raised by a woman who was an immigrant as well. And I thought, why not have her be Korean? Because that would be just true to the ethos of the area. And it was a risk because I don't have Korean influence myself, but I wanted to be, again, just true to the city itself. And I thought it would work well for his character because he is technically an immigrant as well. And so she would be able to empathize with him and his situation, with his struggles, some of his struggles, feeling like an outsider, maybe not necessarily always fitting into the culture. So that was just an idea that I had. And, I questioned, I was like, oh, should I be, writing this character because, I'm a white woman and I don't know this necessarily, but I didn't write a lot of, I didn't feel like I imposed myself.
No, I don't think so. I thought it was just subtle, but I picked up on it. And I know a bunch of people who are kind of obsessed with K-dramas and all of that stuff. I'm like, oh, they're going to love this aspect of it too.
Yeah. And I'm not one of those K-drama people or anything like that. And hopefully I didn't mess up in any way. So, yeah.
So when can we expect book 2? For those of us who are just now already done, it hasn't come out yet, but I'm already like, when is book 2 coming?
I can expect book 2 as soon as I can write it. No, it will be, I'm trying to think when we have it on the schedule at Owl's Nest. I want to say 2024.
Okay. I'm going to hold you to that. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, cool. So when did you know, have you always known that you wanted to be a writer, or was there a moment or a book or something that kind of sparked that desire in you?
I can remember wanting to be an author as young as memories get hazy when you're young, but I want to say as young as age 6 or 7. And then from there I wanted to be like everything, like an actor, a musician, a astronaut, archaeologist for a while, fighter pilot.
Just
you come to a point where you realize that if you're an author, you really can be all of those things.
Right, there you go.
I didn't pursue creative writing in college or like an MFA or anything like that because I quite frankly didn't know that was a thing that you could do. Like nobody ever gave me career direction or advice. And I wasn't really one to ask for that. Like I just thought, well, if you want to be an author, you just write a book and like you submit it for publication. I didn't know what I didn't know, but I did start writing my first I did start writing my first novel when I was 11 or 12, like 7th grade. Not one that got published, because you should not be publishing. You should not be putting anything out in the world for official publication that you write when you are 11 or 12 years old. I know this actually, this shouldn't be a controversial opinion. However, there are a lot of like teenagers out there self-publishing on Amazon these days.
My goodness.
My precious babies, I love you. I'm speaking to them. I love you. I love that you want to write books and that you have drive and passion and so much talent. Please wait until you are older. Okay, I'm speaking to you again, Krista. The reason why is because I would have been horribly embarrassed
Mm.
If I had like, and quite frankly, most published authors, most sane adults, like think about the sorts of things that you were
Yeah.
doing when you were a teenager. Would you really want that on the
Right.
internet for public consumption? Like
Right.
if you publish a book, it's published forever. You
Yeah.
can you can pull it from publication. Like some of
Exactly.
my earliest books, which were self-published, were like the earlier editions of them before I got picked up for the publisher. We pulled the earlier self-published editions, but you can still get them. Like everything that's online is online forever,
Yeah.
forever and ever. It doesn't go away. Like if I had been allowed to publish a book when I was 13 years old, like that would be under my name public. Like I'm just horrified by it. Like I just wish that parents would, and being an author is professional.
Mhm.
No, I'm going on a tangent now, but it's a professional job. Like it's a job. It's a
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Like, so I did not, I'll come back to the topic at hand.
I love it.
I became an author officially after college, once I wisened up and realized what I really wanted to do with my life. By that time I was teaching and I had a brand new baby, and I realized that I'd missed the boat on getting like educated and really how to creatively write and things like that. And so I really hunkered down, and it was a lot of self-study,
Yeah.
a lot of personal study and self-study into, okay, how do you write a novel? Then how do you do this? How do I how have the people who are the most successful at this, that I really admire the most too, how do they do this? And figuring it out, because I did try to get that first book that I ever wrote published, and miserably failed, as you might expect. And that was really humiliating. And I was told that I should just quit by a manuscript evaluation company, and I could have just quit, but decided not to. So, and then when I ultimately ended up writing the first book of my fantasy series, I did have to self-publish it, because I was teaching full time, and I didn't have any time, and we were
Yeah.
to query, and we were very, very poor. And I just thought, well, I'm not going to go through the querying and rejection process again. I'm just going to put this up on Amazon. And I did self-publish the first 3 of that fantasy series, and then I got picked up by an independent publishing house, and that really launched my career, which was remarkable, actually, that happened to me. So, because that
Well,
doesn't
you
happen.
mentioned the Chronicles of Prydain is one of your favorite series. Do you have any other books that not necessarily influenced Orion in particular or your other books in particular, but just you in general, like kind of favorites from early days of Karen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know it's kind of cliche to go back to the old kind of standbys, but I don't care. I mean, the Chronicles of Narnia were my first favorites, that really introduced me to stories and a love of stories, and really established portal fantasy too as my first love of storytelling. And I consider Orion to be a portal fantasy in the same way that I consider Harry Potter to be a portal fantasy. Hogwarts Express is a portal. And of course I read The Hobbit at a very young age as well. I'm always telling kids these days, I'm like, y'all don't understand. You guys have so much to choose from now. When
Yeah,
we were little, it was like,
it wasn't as much.
okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna reread
Chronicles of Narnia over and over
Chronicles of
and over.
Narnia. Like,
I did. I did too. Yeah.
I mean, and then of course the Lord of the Rings, and the Lord of the Rings is still my favorite, all-time favorite. Um, I read Jane Austen. I mean, when I was a young, and I know it's like, wait, fantasy and then Jane Austen, but they have more in common than you would think, as far as storytelling structure is concerned. And when I was studying how to tell stories effectively, and good, like, master storytellers, I mean, of course you study Jane Austen, and of course Harry Potter. Of course that came out when I was a teenager, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say I like Harry Potter anymore, but it
Yeah.
was foundational. It was absolutely foundational for for us in our generation. Yeah, I mean those are my young favorite books, and the books that I really looked to for inspiration. There were some obscure ones like that like there was a series called The Archives of Anthropos that I don't think many people have read at all, but I read it, reread it, and reread it, and reread it. It's by
Nice.
an author called John White. But yeah, that's basically.
What does a day of writing look like for you? Do you have a spot that you sit and write? Do you have like set times that you give yourself? Do you have like your favorite cup of tea? Like, do you have any things that you have to have kind of in place before you sit and write? Or what does that look like?
If I'm going to write, I have to have basically no distractions. I mean, this is the worst, to be perfectly frank. Before these things came along, I was a writing beast.
Yeah.
Like, this is the worst. Twitter is the worst for me. I'm addicted to Twitter. Of course, Twitter may be imploding in the in the near future, so we'll see. But the I have to have no distractions. So that what that means for me with four kids is typically I have to write late at night. So after everybody goes to bed. I'm not an early morning person. I hear this from a lot of authors, is either they have to get up before everybody is awake
Yeah.
or they have to stay up after everybody goes to bed. And so for me, it's after everybody goes to bed. Because I'm also not really one of those people that can do like, oh, I'm just going to do 10 minutes of writing and then I'll do 10 minutes and then I'll do 10 minutes. Like
Yeah.
I have to do writing marathons. It needs to be, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, to really get into a groove. And I have to discipline myself to stay off of social media, in a room by myself too. So yeah, quiet. And I also can't eat anything while I'm writing because I have this tactile thing. I don't like crummies on my fingers because I feel like they're going to get into my laptop.
Yeah.
Drinking is okay. Eating. So yeah.
Do you have seasons where you like we talk about getting in reading slumps as readers? Do you get in writing slumps, and what do you do to help yourself get out of those or avoid those times?
I do not get in writing slumps. I just get into very, very busy periods where I don't have time to
Yeah.
write, like especially now that we have Owl's Nest happening and there's just work to do all the time. And so
Yeah.
it's like especially as I'm getting older now, I can't pull all-nighters like I used to. I mean, to write my fantasy series, sorry, I have books here I'm gesturing to. You're like, what are you doing? To write my fantasy series, it was like, oh, I'll just pull all-nighters for a month. Sleep
Hmm.
2 hours a night for a month. I was in my 20s. We were young and free, it's like, can't do
Right.
that anymore. I will be in a world of pain. Like,
Yeah.
so no, but I don't because that was something I read early on when I was kind of researching how do the successful writers do this.
Hmm.
Is I don't remember if it was in a book or it was an article or something, but someone somewhere said in answer to the question, what do you do about writer's block? And they said, writer's block doesn't exist. This is my job. You get up and you go to work.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, it doesn't exist. Like, I can't say, like, if I'm in the middle of writing a book, I can't say, oh, I'm just not feeling it today. I'm not going to write today. Like, there's a deadline. You meet the deadline. Like, you have to treat it like any other job.
Hmm.
Now, you can take a sick day if you're sick. But like when I was a teacher, I couldn't call my boss and say, I'm having teacher's block today.
Yeah.
So I'm just not going to make it.
Yeah.
That's okay with you, right? Like that's not the way it works. So, but that's also the beauty of having a well-planned novel and having a full outline is there's always something that I can write. I don't sit down on my computer and go, I don't have any idea what comes next. Because I do know what comes next. It's in my outline.
Yeah.
So even if I feel like I've put garbage on the page, it's okay. You can revise garbage. You can't revise a blank page. I'm not the person who originated that. I know people have heard that before. It's a well-known saying, but yeah.
I love it. Let's talk about Owl's Nest real quick. So Owl's Nest is a brand new publishing house company. What do you call it? Publishing house. Yeah.
Either one. Yeah. Publishing house company.
It's been a year. How long now? A year? And
Technically, yeah, we opened our doors for submissions in January of this year, but we've been established since September of last year.
So Owl's Nest purpose is to provide quality literature for middle grade and teen readers. And I love that you say teen and not YA. Tell us why. I think you might have mentioned it already, but say it again.
Yeah. Well, and I can kind of rephrase it a little bit here too.
Yeah.
We just feel like the YA market is being served right now with plenty of books from the traditional publishing houses, and that the YA market has become a very specific thing that is not necessarily targeted to teenagers themselves. The YA market is a very specific type of book, type of story. And it actually is not even all about the stories themselves. It's about the size of the book, the price points of the books, the cover art of the books. YA books these days are really aimed and targeted to adult women. Which is kind of a sad thing to say. So YA books are ostensibly, and I'm painting with a broad brush, understand that these are generalizations. It's the usual caveat. It's not all YA, but they tend to ostensibly be about teenagers. But if you read the stories, it's hard to find a YA book that tells an authentic story about authentic teenagers and how they think, speak, act, emote, so forth and so on. So when Katie and I were setting out to form Owl's Nest, that became a cornerstone of what we're doing, is that we want to publish books that represent, that capture, as is in our mission statement, the adolescent experience, the real teenagers, where they're really at in their minds, in their hearts, in their spirits. Whether that's contemporary stories, fantasy stories, science fiction, mysteries, poetry, we're doing poetry as well, so forth and so on. So we are distancing ourselves from the YA label. When people review their books, sometimes they'll call our books, sometimes they'll call them YA, and that's fine. We are calling our books teen. We understand we're not going to, revolutionize the publishing industry or anything like that. We're a very small publishing house, although that would be awesome if we did. We need a lot of people to buy our books, if that's going to happen. But we are very small, and we have not a lot of money right now, but we will have more money if people come in and buy our books. But the which people are, and more people will. But so we've got that kind of corner of what we're doing. And then we also see a huge gap in the industry for stories told to that upper middle grade, sort of transitional age between middle grade and YA, which is what the traditional industry really focuses on. There are just not a lot of books being written to kids between the ages of 13 and 15, 16, right? So that's a gap that we're looking to serve, that we're looking to kind of step into to meet the need. There are so many parents out there. And again, this is anecdotal, but there are so many parents, and I'm one of them, that just struggles to find books that I would really feel comfortable putting into the hand of my 15-year-old who reads faster than I can possibly keep up with. I used to be able to read like that, but running a company and writing all the books now, so you've got this gap that needs to be served. And then, of course, we're publishing traditional middle grade aged books as well. Just it just makes sense to not that we necessarily feel that there's a huge gap in the industry in traditional middle grade, but it doesn't really make sense to only publish upper middle grade and teen and leave out middle grade. So, but we are staying away from the sort of Captain Underpants style books and just kind of publishing books that are more not so much like body humor. We're just kind of staying away from body humor type stuff and sticking more to we like to say we're looking for books that kind of exemplify the classical virtues.
There you go.
Yeah,
I like that. Okay, are you ready for some rapid fire questions? We're going to kind of wind down a little bit here. Otherwise, I feel like we could chat forever. Yeah. It's not super rapid fire. You can take your time.
Okay.
But
okay.
Do you have a favorite place to sit and read when you get a chance? I know you probably are so busy.
I do, and it is there.
I love it. The corner of your couch. Love it. Do you have a favorite genre to read yourself? I mean, you've talked a lot about
gateway fantasy, or gateway fantasy.
Nice. Do you prefer reading paperback, hardback, ebooks, or audiobooks?
Paperback.
Deckled edges or no?
Deckled edges. Never thought about it.
Quiet reading or background noise?
Quiet. I will snipe at you if you talk to me when I'm reading.
Pumpkin spice latte or hot apple cider?
Hot apple cider.
What are you currently reading right now?
Well, I just finished reading A Monster Calls like last night. Crying in bed.
I set that book down and had a sob after when I finished it. Yeah. Holy.
I was like quietly crying so my house I wouldn't wake my husband up.
A book that you love to recommend to other people?
Everything Sad is Untrue.
Good. Okay, and then just a final kind of question. What are you currently working on as far as Owl's Nest and your own writing and in general?
Okay, so I am working on writing the sequel to Son of the Deep. So the second in the fairy tale collection. And then I am editing a really fantastic novel in verse. So this is all Owl's Nest stuff, obviously, called Hertz Gets Fused, that will be out next May. I mean, those are the two books that I'm in the middle of right now.
Nice.
So yeah.
Well, that is all for today. I thank you so much, Karen, for hanging out and talking about Orion. You guys, I will have a link to Owl's Nest and this book in particular if you want to purchase it. It comes out on November 15th, which is very soon. So get your hands on it. It's fantastic. Middle grade by Owl's Nest and by Karen, the lovely Karen. So thank you for being my guinea pig author.
It's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed getting to hear from Karen and her thoughts about Orion and the Starborn and other things as well. I just really enjoyed chatting with her. I would love to chat with you down in the comments below. Do you think this sounds like a book that you would enjoy? What do you think about the interview? Any other thoughts or questions or comments that you have, I would love to chat with you down in the comments below. I always love talking with you down there. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. It really means the world. And I will be chatting with you in another video very soon. Bye.